Hello, hello, hello. So this is going to be one of the last presentations of the day. So I'm actually super excited, mainly not because it's such a good topic, but also he's a very, very talented and good friend, Victor Perez, who we grew up in visual effects together as compositors. So sensitometry for visual effects. It's going to blow your mind. So let's give a warm welcome to Victor Perez.
Hello. So, sensitometry, what a strange word. I'm going to talk today about cinematography applied to visual effects. One of the things that everybody is told when they are starting in visual effects is like, oh, you are a compositor, so you have to grab a camera and you have to learn photography. So what do? You just take the photo and you become a better compositor. Cling, magic. No, it's not like that. So first of all, I would like to know how many people in this room is a compositor? Okay? The rest of the people, no worries. Nobody's perfect. So I'm going to start with the statement of this, which is photography is part art and part science. The science part is called sensitometry. So we need to address the first thing, which is the main question. What is sensitometry? So sensitometry is the scientific study of light-sensitive materials, hence the science of measuring of photographic materials, blah, 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 blah. So it's just the study of how materials react to light. Because certain materials, more than others, react to light. For instance, silver. Silver, that is the main material that cinema was made of. Now is other things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the convention of film, but just as a convention, film in terms of film stock, okay? But digital cameras and all of that are going to behave more or less the same way. Okay, so I'm just going to use terminology just because it's going to be easier for you if you want to keep studying this to find materials and resources. So it's just that, it's how light is going to affect things. So in here, I always use a lot of materials from Kodak because, of course, nobody better knows the film as Kodak. And they have something that I always try to remember, which is as a photographer, graphic arts, cameraman, cinematographer, or other use of photographic materials, you will see sensitometry in the controls of operations involving exposing and processing photographic materials. Photographic manufacturers also use sensitometric methods in the control of manufacturing process. I'm just going to add something in there, which is also VFX Artists. So if we are using light as the source for work, you need to understand what is the sensitometric parameters and all of that. And the other day I received a comment that is very cute, which is, oh, but that is not how the world works, because when you are working in the industry, nobody pays attention to that. Oh, that is very, very long, time-consuming thing, and senior compositors never use that process. Senior compositors have enough experience to do that while they don't even understand what they are doing. Let me try to explain in another way. Can you explain to someone how to ride a bicycle? With words, just with words. Can you explain balance and speed and torque and that? Is that going to make you a better cyclist? Well, probably not. But if you understand that in a bicycle, if you don't have enough speed, you fall, that is maybe something that you have to keep in mind. Well, this is what I'm going to start with. I just want you to understand that there are certain principles that once you know why they happened, it's going to make much faster and easier to address color matching, which is what we are going to do in here. So for me, to answer to that kind of comment that everybody is going to have, because today we are going to see is like something like seems rocket science, but actually it's something that you already are doing in an intuitive way. So what we are going to do is just to address everything that you have in your head to put it in a certain logical environment. So for that, the first thing that I want to show you is a sensitometric curve. This is a sensitometric curve. In the times that digital was still not invented, cinematographers, in order to understand the properties of a film stock, they had to understand those lines. So those lines are just the fingerprint of the stock, of the film, or something. And every system, every capturing system in the world has something like this. Of course, it's not exactly like that, because everybody is different. But if you understand how that thing works, you are going to get way more understanding on how to match and go fine-tuning that. For me, this is what makes the difference between a good compositor and a great compositor. So you can learn it by experience, or you can learn it by theory and apply by experience. But at the end of the day, if you know, you are just going to have a shortcut. I wish someone explained me this when I started working on that. I just learned that by a collateral thing when I was studying cinematography many years ago. Not that many. I am very young. So what are the sensitometric curves? Those things that we saw. So the sensitometric curves describe a certain film's response to red, green, and blue light. They determine the change in density on the film for a given change of log exposure. What is the meaning of this? It's like the more light you give to that material, the different is going to act. And this is going to be, in practical terms, very easy. But instead of working with the colors and the balance, that is very for the film stock, I'm just going to focus on something that is the most important, that is, in average, luminance. So the whole light, how light is going to behave. And for that, we have the characteristic curve, which is a graph representing a single curve, one curve, to relate the resulting value capture, so we are going to call density, exposure, and contrast index to each other. So it's a relation. We are going to understand so many things just by observing the curve. On the vertical axis, resulting value capture, so the density, and in the horizontal axis, the log of exposure. Forget about the log of exposure. We are just going to call the horizontal line, we're going to call it the amount of light. And the vertical line, for us, the value we get. So the easiest way to understand this is going to be like, in a linear world, so in a CG virtual world, if you have one candle, you have a certain amount of light. So if I tell you, if you have two candles, how much light do you have in relation with the first one? So with one candle, you have a certain amount of light. Two candles, double of that certain amount of light. Okay? Makes sense. Well, in the real world, that is not like that. One candle, you get nothing because it's not enough. Two candles is nothing. Three candles, you start seeing something. Four candles, okay, you see something well. 3 million candles is more or less like 80,000 million candles. There is a range for that. So this way of understanding light is what we are going to define as the sensitometric parameters that we need to understand. So this is going to be our graphic for reference, okay? Horizontal, amount of light, vertical, value, okay? So how is that looking like in the CG virtual world? So it's looking like this. So the more light you apply, the more value you get, and it's just going up to the infinite, because it's just virtual, so you have like numbers. And in the virtual world, this equation makes sense. But for this, you have like a linear arithmetic progression. One candle, amount of light, two candles, double that. Okay, that is very cool. So the exposure and the density is just going to have like the same ratio, 1:1. Okay, and that is called linear light. Okay, so this is a straight line. And that is something that we are going to use very often in the CG. Notice something that is very important, which is this, the minimum value. In the CG world, because it's so cool, you have zero value. So you can have black, for instance. If you forgot to put lights in Maya scene and you press render, what you get is just, surprise, surprise, a black frame. Black with everything looks zero. In the real world, it's very weird. Because if you forget the cap of the lenses and you take a picture, it's not valued zero. It's something slightly above valued zero. So what is coming from there? So that is something that we need to analyze, that this linear light progression works in CG. So that's why we want to work in linear light. So all the operations, the mathematical operations that we apply, we want them to look like, yeah, linear. So when you multiply something times 2, it's going to look double the light. I'm going to have a practical examples at the end of the lecture so you can understand what the practical terms of that. So now we're going to look at the film world. So now we are in another world. And in another world, you have the exposure, so the amount of light, and the values. And that is looking really weird, because it's even going down at the end. So why this? And just make me clarify something. This is just, I made this curve this way, so it's over-exaggerated, for you to understand well what I mean. But the curve is actually looking slightly different. Remember the curves that we saw before from the Kodak? So this is just for you to understand the parts. Because even if it's bigger or smaller or whatever, or taller or shorter, the shape is always the same. And I'm going to demonstrate that. So this is a characteristic curve for a given film, whatever. So what are the parts that we need to understand in here? The first thing is what I said before. It's like, OK, we are going to keep the value, the density scale, because we are going to work with digital. But we need to understand that the minimum value that we can get is not here. It's slightly there, slightly higher. Well, that is called the minimum density. So the minimum density is how black is the black. When you are starting compositing, the first thing you learn to match things is like black point with the black of the CG, blah, 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 all of that. Well, this is the famous black point. But that black point of the footage has a very particular name, which is lift. The lift, actually, if you remember, this is spoiler alert for the people that is not a compositor. In the grade note, you have a lift control. And that lift control serves this purpose, to understand how high is that level. So after that, we're going to analyze the curve in a horizontal level. So the first part that we have is this section. This section that, as you can see, is just flat. So no matter how much light you are going to apply in there, you get no result. Is the example of 1 candle? Nothing. 2 candles? Nothing. 3 candles? Nothing. 4 candles? OK. But those 3 candles are still in there. So you don't have any detail, because the sensor or whatever is not getting enough enough light to produce some detail in the density. So this is named the base and fog. Fog because you get details lost in there, in that fog of blackness. Sounds very cool. So the base and fog is the first part. After that, you have another area that is just setting the recovery of the curve. It's when the light is going to start. But it's not linear. So it's just going to have like an area where light is just going to start reacting somehow. That area is called the toe. I don't know why they call it a toe. It doesn't look like a toe to me, but they call it the toe. So that is the toe, the area that is starting. Then you have like the star, the superstar of the curve, the one that everybody is familiar, is the straight line. Is that section of the curve that is more or less linear. It means that for a given exposure, you have a given incremental value. So that is the star. So usually, when they ask you to match the blacks and the whites, they tell you, oh, black point, white point. Well, yeah, that's it. It's so easy. So you're actually focusing on that area. The other areas are not that, I mean, that well known because cinematographers don't want to put detail in there. So they are not going to have details in those areas that are overexposed or underexposed. This thing is the gamma. That the gamma of the exposition is just going to get like the inclination, let's call the slope of that curve, okay? So that is going to define the contrast ratio that we are going to talk in a moment. The contrast ratio, in my experience as a visual effects supervisor, is like the weakest point of every compositor. It's like sometimes you get the white point right, the black point right, but what is in the middle makes no sense. And this is why this thing is very important. Because the worst feeling that you can have as an artist is that you look at something, you have done everything right, and it looks wrong. That is the worst ever. Because I'm very happy. If something is looking great, of course I'm super happy. If something is looking bad, and I know why, it's even cool because I know what I can fix. But the worst thing is when something is not working and you don't know how to fix it. That is what is going to put you in trouble. Because it's like, okay, can you see that it's not working? Yeah. Can you fix it? No. Okay, so let's go to the next part. I can demonstrate that is the peripheral sides that are messing with you and the perception. So the last part of this curve is that super part in there that is the shoulder. Again, it doesn't look like a shoulder, but they just want to humanize this curve. So shoulder, toe, whatever. So the shoulder is that area that the curve is just stop reacting. No matter the amount of light you are going to put at a certain point, it's like, okay, I'm done. This is like the maximum density that you can get in there. So that point is representing exactly that. It doesn't show in here very well. But in that point in there is representing the maximum density. You cannot get brighter than that. There is a part that actually now manufacturers, now have been a while, manufacturers try to hide, try to address that. But you need to know that at a certain point, after that level, you have another area of the curve that is going to react in a very strange way. That area that you cannot see right now in there because it's not, yeah, here you are, the clip, that is like, no matter the light you put in there, it's going to get lost. So no hope. But actually, in the last part, you have something that looks unnatural, which is the solarization area. What is the solarization? The solarization is what happens when you apply so much light that instead of going brighter, it gets darker. And it's something that you have seen, because it's very typical, especially from old cameras. Well, not that old, but yeah, from film stock. This is a very famous photograph, which is called The Black Sun, Owens Valley, California, by Ansel Adams. This picture is from 1939. Look at the sun. It's black. Why is black? Because the sun, if you don't know, is very bright. So yeah, that is why it's happening. That is the solarization. Solar thin, solar cream, you know, black. So here you are. It's just getting too much light in there. So in order to understand how to approach the process of grading for matching, you need to understand what are the parts of the curve that we are focusing, that we are seeing, that our monitor is displaying, and all of that. Why this is becoming so important? Before, in the SDR world, so in the non-HDR world, you can hide your dirty parts under the carpet. Everybody has, as a compositor, has skeletons in their wardrobes. I have plenty. There are shots that I've seen in the screen, mine, that I know them very well, and nobody notices, but I notice because I did it, so I know where I was. So in here, with the HDR world, there is no carpet to put the dirty. Now you have to do it right. Because have you ever seen an HDR film on an HDR TV, which HDR visual effects that doesn't look great, and this is an euphemism? This is because of that. It's just you are not paying attention. If you are grading something HDR in a non-HDR monitor, probably you are not seeing the whole picture. So in here, this line is just representing the practical underexposed line. So this is what, in practical terms, what you are going to consider black. But there is something in there that is escaping from us. On the other axis, we have the minimum image density. This is the amount of light. This is more for photographers or cinematographers. This is the amount of light that under that you get no detail. So the horizontal is for them. The vertical is for us. So we don't care what they do, but we need to understand that something is happening with those areas that you don't get enough light. The same on the other side. There is a practical overexposed line, which means after that line, everything seems white, but it's not white, especially if you are in HDR, because white has so many shades of white. So that is the usual white point and black point, and everybody is forgetting. So the real problem that is happening is like this. The minimum density, this is just for your context, the minimum density and the brightest is just in a different level. So that is the areas that you have to understand. So when you are actually practicing photographs, what you need to understand is the latitude. The latitude is that area that you want to expose things. So you are taking a portrait. So you have like a very nice light in here, everything in darkness, but then a bit of background in here, because if not, you are not going to see that area of the shape. So you need to understand that you have to play as a photographer. You play with the whole thing. Even if you have like practical bracketing, so an area that you are going to use, you need to understand that there is a whole thing. And then the most important part, the dynamic range, that we hear about that a lot. And what is the dynamic range? Well, it's the contrast ratio. It's the amount of values, the amount of areas that we can expose, and we still have detail in there. So again, horizontal, so those lines that are horizontal, cinematographers, if you want to learn, you need to practice. But the verticals, nobody escaped to the vertical lines, because those are ours. So when we start practicing this, and you want to visualize this in a more graphical way, I'm just going to represent a gradient in this characteristic curve. Of course, this is a projector, and we have lights in there, so you don't see that there is much difference in the areas, but this is representing the actual curve that is over that gradient. Bless you. So in the straight line, we have that gradient that looks like very persistent, very linear, okay? That is what we perceive as the nice area of exposure. Okay, that's very cool. What I care is about the rest. So if you just focus about this part of the curve, so I'm just bracketing everything so you don't get distracted, and you have your CG that is looking like this. This is your CG, remember? CG is starting from 0, going until the infinite, or whatever the line you put, and then what you want is just to remap that, to put it, you know, black, white point into the gain, spoiler alert, black point into the lift, so you get that. Cool. And then you say, okay, my shot is done, and then you go to a projector, and then it's like, this shot is looking strange. Why is that looking strange? Well, because of this. This is what is happening if you don't take care of the whole curve. That in here you have your blacks are going strangely very low. Don't you dare to clamp the blacks. Every time you clamp the blacks, a faded dies. Never clamp the blacks. You apply the tone. In the shoulder, it's just the whites are just behaving very strange. So why is that? So this is what is happening. This, can you see even with the projector and the lights and everything, can you see the difference, especially in the whites? It's just a different. The one on top is a linear gradient. The one on the below is just the target characteristic curve. This is just to see what just the natural thing. So that part matches, so it's nice, but that mismatch. Maybe nobody notices. But then the evil people is going to come. So this is what you see in your monitor. So everything looks amazing because just a little mismatch. It's something like that. You don't need to care. Oh yeah, over there. Nobody will notice this thing, this evil quote. No worries, nobody will notice. evil people and their tools. I think they just play with our feelings. They just want, okay, let's just make software the visual effects artist. That is what they teach in color correcting. So this is what happens to your shot after you get the correction. Everything gets mismatched because every time you stretch, you are actually making everything to stretch, even the mismatches. So what I propose is just a methodology, and by the way, spoiler alert, NUKE was designed for that. NUKE has the nodes to work to replicate that. But nobody uses because, that takes so long or whatever. So what is the actual purpose that we need when we are doing integration? It's not just white point, black point, a bit of gamma that nobody knows what is the gamma for, and it's just doing that until magically it matches. But no. What you need to do is to actually, as Steve Wright used to say, massage the curve. So we have to rebuild a curve that is going to do that and create the CGI sensitometric match. So once you understand what you are looking for, you can apply something. There are 3 levels of knowledge. Things you know, everybody's cool, because if you know it, it's cool. Things that you know that you don't know, that is not that bad, because you can search Wikipedia, tutorials on YouTube. You can search, because you know that you don't know. The evil part of that is the things that you don't know, because you cannot research about something you don't know, because you don't know that you have to research about that. So that is why this class for me is not just important that you get to understand and tomorrow now, you sensitometric God. No. What I want you to understand is just to be curious and to say, maybe I should learn about that. Don't search on YouTube. There is nothing about that. But there is Kodak, for instance. They are very nice. They share things for free. You can learn in many other ways. Now you can even take the photographs and start analyzing and get, the toe. Don't do it. Don't get hurt. So what I want to show you now is a practical application of that. But I'm going to use this color transformation analysis that is a setup of nodes that I created in NUKE. And because I'm very nice, because my grandmother used to tell me that, I'm just going to give you that tool for free. So you can download it. It's a setup. And I'm just going to give you 1 minute. So I'm going to drink water. It only works for NUKE. You can even sell it. If you are rich, give me half. So let's go with the practical. Give me a sec. OK. So, OK. No, interesting. It's just in the other window. This is going to be a good one, because I don't see anything in here. But I can see in there. So I could do mirroring, but I don't want to waste your time. Actually, which is very cool, is that I can move. Product placement for Wacom. So something that we can do when we are in here is, this is the tool. Right now, I'm just using like a blank, so there is nothing in there. All the corrections that I applied in here are all deactivated. So what I want to show you is, like, if I put a grade in here, those are the sliders that you have, OK? So let's just play easy maths. No worries. We don't need to go like super crazy with the things. You just need to apply easy. For instance, let's start with the multiply. The grade is something that we're going to use to model the first sculpture of the curve. But in order to sculpture, you need to understand the mathematical operations. What are the repercussions that you are doing with that? So multiply. everybody knows what is a multiply. And I'm not going to ask you for complex multiplications. It's like times 2, for instance. This curve that I have in here, let me just put this at 1, maybe at 2, yeah, something like that. This curve is representing this gradient in a linear distribution, so it's a linear thing. So value 0, value 1. So this is value 0.25, 0.5, 0.75. So what if I put in here times 2? So if I multiply anything in here times 2, let's make it with your head first. Compositing happens in here, and NUKE is just a translator of ideas, okay? So 0 times 2, 0. 0.5 times 2, 1. 1 times 2, 2, and it's going to be very high. So who wants to bet? Here you are. So I was able to predict how this curve is going to look like. So I can even tell you that the curve is continuing in there. So in here, you have values. Can you see in there? There are values that are going even above 1. So what is the whole point of this? It's like if you understand and you can predict what the curves are doing, you can actually model just by looking at the numbers. It's like the matrix. So the thing is like NUKE is a very expensive software, I know. This one is a multiplication, okay? Good. Gain. What is gain? Let's do the other way around. Let's apply a number. Oh, gain is a multiplication. Yeah, the software is very expensive, but you have twice the same operation. And does it make any sense? Well, actually, it does make a lot of sense. So gain and multiply are two multiplications. Let's have a look at the lift. Lift. Let's do the same. Whoa, it's very strange. Let's do the other way around. Interesting. Remember when I told you that that part in the beginning of the curve was called lift? Well, this is the lift. And someone can tell me, yeah, but the lift is very different. Well, it's not. It's actually, if you look like this, it's a multiplication. But it's an inverse multiplication. So if you put before the grade, you put an inverse, and then after you put another inverse, it's just going to be a multiplication. So it's an inverse multiplication. Let's reset that. Now, instead of doing the number, now I'm just going to work with this, with the sliders. Oh, let me put this at 0. Sliders. Let's play the game. Let's see who tells me what this is. Oh, wait, not this one. Let's go with the other, it's easier. Yeah, it's a very expensive software. And someone can tell me, oh, yeah, I saw that before. That is clearly a multiplication. Have a look. Oh, wow. It's actually, when this is 0.5, it's looking like twice. And if I go all the way down here twice, it's looking like a half. So it's not a multiplication. It was all a lie. It's actually a division. But instead of looking at the sliders as multiplication and division, oh, this is very numerical. I'm an artist, visual artist. I don't want numbers. That's why I'm an artist. So if not, I will be like a serious profession, like a plumber or something like that. So instead of using divisions and multiplications, I'm just going to tell you something. It's like multiplication goes that way, up and down. Division goes this way, horizontal. So I can actually target any point in there and just put it, my end of the curve in there. So let me just put this at value 1. And I'm just going to target this point in here. So I want to put the white point at 0.25. And then once I am in there, I want to go down at 0.75. Remember Battleship, the game? Coordinates? It's exactly that. So let's see if I'm right. Imagine that I wasn't. 0.25. I hope it works. Well, the first one is not that bad. 0.75. Here you are. It's in there. And what happens with this? Well, that is the rest of the curve. This is what I meant. It's like there is still a world that is in there. When you are working with the white point has something very different from the black point. The black point is always absolute. Why? Because once you don't have any light, you don't have any light. You cannot add darkness. But when you have lights, depending on what are you sampling in the picture, you can have brighter samples or darker, brighter samples. So brightness, when you are sampling, there is a marginal error of human observation that we have to embrace. But in the other hand, we have the lift that we can match that numerically. I'm not going to do it in here because this is not the purpose. But what I wanted you to know is that there is a whole setup of nodes that you can use for that. So what I want you to get, by the way, the offset is just a plus in case you want to know, and the gamma is just power options for division, blah, 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 log, blah, blah. I'm not going to enter in that. That is not important. What I can tell you is you need at least 3 nodes for doing the match. 3. There is a 4 that is actually more than 4, but it's 3 kind of nodes. So I'm going to go here, press F. And you need 1 grade, that is for doing this, the first structural modeling of the sensitometric curve. Then forget about the color correct. That is something, that is like an extra. The color correct has the ability to select the range, so you can model certain ranges. But what you are going to need always is a toe. The toe is that area. How do you recover? And then, sometimes, depending on what you have exposed, remember that is relative, you're going to need also the soft clip to recreate the shoulder. So I'm just going to make in here, I'm going to activate this just for you to see the shape of this curve. Probably now, you are going to think like, oh, this is not looking like what you show, because in the beginning you said that there is a part that is flat. Bear with me. It's in there. Once I'm going to be able to press Shift at the same time. Just give me a sec. I think we need to go harder. Here you are. See? That is the toe. I know it feels very silly and very small. That's why I make it over-exaggerated in the other curve. But there is an anthropologic thing that is going to make that part very critical. That is, human beings are way more used to understand details in the darkness more than in the bright areas, for one simple reason. We have been living in the darkness for many years, in the caves for million years. So our eyes have been evolving a lot just to work in low light conditions. And this thing of having lights inside homes, that is relatively new. It's something like less than 200 years ago. So before we have candles that are lighting very little. So that's why that little variation in there is very significant, which is one of the reasons why codecs, for instance, most of them work in a log way. So you have more detail where you need it and less detail in the high areas. It doesn't mean that the bright areas are not important, but still you need to understand that detail is discrete. So in here, this is like the curve. This is the shoulder. This picture that I'm going to show you that is representing the image, this one, this is the integration, okay? So if I deactivate that, I'm just going to activate also that. This is that sensitometric curve that I show you, this is how it looks like. Of course, right now it's not dry because I have been playing around with this, but if I put this in, oh, I'm just going to, luminance, here you are. If I put my viewer like that, using just luminance, just to forget about color for a second, you are going to see that the picture actually makes more sense. In terms of integration, I just want to call something in here just to show something like that. Let's put the color, it's fine, in this example. Have I told you about the base and fog, that you don't have any detail? Well, tell me when the arm ends and the back starts, because there is no difference. It's so dark that you have no difference in there. There are no details that are going to make you. Of course, your brain is very smart and it's going to make you understand that there is an arm and there is a back in there. But you have no detail in there. And even more, this is what black looks like. And it doesn't look very black to me. So this is the thing. Once you understand the properties of the sensitometry, you are just going to see the problems and going to address the problems. By the way, when you have a problem with the sensitometric curve, you don't add nodes to fix it. You need to understand where is the problem. It's in the lift, you go there. Where is the problem? It's in the toe, you go there. Where is the problem? It's in the high area, the shoulder, I go there. It's in the middle that I need to address something. Okay, I add color corrects just to target that particular area. Addressing the particular area is something that like super expert mode. So no worries about that, because the tiny variations in the middle are just going to be very, very subtle and nobody will notice. But at the end, everything can be done with a grade, a toe, and a soft clip. No more and no less. Don't add a grade to fix the grade, because a fairy dies also there. Okay? So now, after this, if you have any questions, now I think is the right time, if they allow me.
Let's give a round of applause to Victor.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want you to be my maths teacher. He makes graphs look so sexy, right? Okay, so we've got some time, some questions. We're going to have a microphone passed around, so don't be shy. Victor's very open, so anyone ask questions about sensitometry or compositing or color curves? There's one down there.
So, hello. I am currently a VFX assistant at my university, the SAE Institute, which means I get a lot of stuff to do, like figuring out lessons for all kinds of stuff. But my personal wish is to go into compositing. So my question to you is, what kind of lessons / programs should I teach that would be beneficial to me too?
Okay. I will say that I see lately a lot of emphasis in the software, but the software is like the less important part of the compositing, because if you are a good compositor, the software is irrelevant. Of course, you need to use the standards for whatever, blah, 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 but compositing is not about software. Compositing is about knowing what you are doing with the software. So I will say photography, this kind of photography apply things, and also there is many good people that is teaching software, but with the application of compositing. We have in the room Hugo Guerra, which is one of the best. And so you are going to find a lot of materials in there. He's one of my favorites. So you can find resources in there. The danger of this is like in compositing, many people can agree with that if they have experience, is like the danger is like YouTube is full of people teaching grown things. So it's like knowing, so I will say like, in the very beginning, when you don't have any reference, and it's even very difficult that I tell you what you need to, because there are so many things that you have to cover. I will say like, you don't have to trust a school, an institution. You should trust the teacher. Is the teacher validated for what he's doing? Because there are two things. that being a teacher for me is like the most difficult thing, because you have to be good at two things. You have to be good at what you are doing, and you have to be good at transferring what you are doing. So the teacher, at the end of the day, is the most important. So you can get the basics everywhere. How to use NUKE, even Foundry has free resources for that. But how to use NUKE is a very different thing from how to composite. Composite is something that is based on observation. So observation requires understanding. Understanding requires knowledge of science. So you need to be aware of an event, how to observe the event, how to synthesize the event, and how to transfer. So people that is teaching the software is just going to focus on the last part, how to make something happen in there. And many tutorials about how to make this thing to look real. I don't want to learn something to look, I want to learn how to make real everything. So it's more about, for me, I prefer fundamentals. Fundamentals of photography, fundamentals of computer graphics, fundamentals of, but that is also coming from experience, so don't get too anxious about all of this information. But what the only piece of advice that I will allow myself to give you is just be curious. Be curious. I mean, I remember times that I was looking through the window, looking at the mountains, sipping my coffee, like 15 minutes in a row, and my wife telling me, "Are you okay?" And it's like, yeah, I'm just trying to understand how to synthesize the moisture between the distance between me and the mountains and the amount of moisture depending on the atmospheric inclination of the light. And I say, okay, you are not okay. So these kind of things, but at the end, you create something in your head that makes sense. Even if it's wrong, is right, because you are researching, and that is what is going to make. So learning comes from experience. So just make sure that whoever is just placing something in your head is someone that loves you. Any other questions?
There's one down there as well, and then there's one behind.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have maybe a little bit tricky question, because this is for the live action compositing, but if the shot is full CG or the CG animation stuff, maybe it's a wrong question, but I will ask it anyway.
Not at all.
But what you would recommend for somebody who's in that part of the compositing, what you would recommend to start with, because the picture should kind of interact the same way as the normal one, but that's more, in my experience, that's more harder just to do something out of nothing, because you don't have anything to compare with and to start with. So my question is, how do you recommend to start with a shot like that?
That is actually a very, very good question. When I was working at Rogue One many years ago, for some reason, they just decided to give me all the full CG shots. Because they look great. Yeah, they look great, because I'm actually not just doing magic. I'm just taking other shots of the film in the same sequence, and I'm just matching the blacks, the whites, the sensitometric thing. So I was acting like a matching. But instead of matching in frame, I was matching interframe. So I was matching with the other shots. So at the end, I was doing the same. In animation, well, in animation is different, because in animation, you can create the look that you want. And actually, I created a short film in Unreal Engine that I was showcasing downstairs, and I'm going to be showcasing every day for ASUS. I behave exactly, it's a full animation thing, but I wanted to look like shot by a camera. So I went on internet and I just tried to find footage from the 50s, because I wanted to match the 50s look. So I was getting like, okay, this is how the things are going to look. You have like, it was very, okay, this is very geeky, but I understood that in the toe was unbalanced. So you have like the magenta from the very dark tones, and I was like, oh, this is very great. Nobody will notice that, okay? But for me, it's very important. And you know, this thing that nobody will notice is an orchestra. If you remove one violin, nobody will notice. If you remove one violin, one trumpet, one clarinet, okay, it's going to look crap. So that is the thing. You have to pay a lot of attention. Every instrument in your symphony must be like correctly aligned. So if I know that something must be in a certain way, I have to do it. So all of these that now may seem like overwhelming, once you know how to do it, actually, I was working with the CG shot like this. Pop, 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 pop. It's very easy because at the end of the day, it's actually easier because you don't have, the eye cannot reference to something in the shot, in the frame. So that is why, at the end, something looks great, because you are going to replicate. I don't invent anything. As a compositor, you don't want to invent. You want nobody to notice your job, because good compositors are those that nobody notices. The worst thing that someone can tell you is, oh, that looks like an amazing piece of CG. You are done. Because you don't want them to see it. It's like, oh, shit, I don't want them. So the best compliment that they can tell you is like, oh, was that CG? And it's like, okay, thank you very much. So yeah, that is how it works.
Can I have one more?
Okay, then we've got one behind, but you go. Yeah.
So, great job. I've been doing that for a very long time. Normalized, it's not very long, but I've been doing that for a long time. The question I have for you is, do you have a 10-hour version of this presentation?
I will, honestly,
yeah.
I do.
Oh, great. Okay,
Of course you do.
So the thing I do as a VFX supervisor myself, the thing I do is
I can just talk very slow. But no, actually, I have a course, and this is self-promotion, and I don't like it. But it's called the Master of Light.
Okay.
I discuss this in application with many other ways.
Which is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Perfect. As I'm teaching to a lot of different countries, and they just go with the basic, and they think they know everything, and then so on and so forth. So great job. Thank you. That's very well explained.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
If you don't have any more questions,
no,
I
there's
will.
one guy here.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just wondering, is there sometimes a situation where you want to do it the other way around, where you would linearize the film data instead of putting the curve onto the linear?
I don't have to do that because the software is going to do that for me. So the software, I mean, if you are working on a color managed workflow, you have operations that are going to linearize the camera for you. For instance, if you are working on ACEs, ACEs have like what is called IDT, input device transforms, that are just going to get the data from the camera, linearize, and put it into the ACEs color space. And the ACEs color space is going to be linear, so you are working with linear. But the linear is the representation for working purposes, what is called the working space. But the actual color space is going to represent also the toe, the blah, blah, blah. So you have to represent that in a linear fashion. So the operations, and inside NUKE, we are working linearly, as I said. But the operations that you have to, in order to replicate, must represent that non-linear progression. So you have 3 operations. Every time you are working, even if you don't know, you have 3 operations, 3 color space. One is the operations to get in the work space. Other is the operation that is linear inside, and the other is the operation. In NUKE, you have the read node with the color space. You have in the top area here, this is for your monitor. This is the output device transform for your monitor. And then you have like the one for the grid. So you're doing a lot of linearizations and unlinearizations for that, but you shouldn't do that by eye, because by eye the only thing that you can do is this operation, because at the end there is no way of applying. There are lots that are good as a starting point, but I would say that I never find myself comfortable working with LUTs, because it's just applying a color correction over your color correction. So I prefer just to start from scratch. If I get wrong, I get wrong for myself, so I know where to fix it.
How about the question?
Yeah, sure.
One. I mean, you're showing NUKE, which is amazing, but as you've mentioned several times, it's quite expensive. There's a lot of movies out there being comped in Fusion, in After Effects. Does that all work? That, in principle, right?
Yeah. I have no idea about other softwares. It's like, I'm not going to say that they are better or they're worse. I mean, I'm just used to work with this. And I have been, in my own experience, previously I was using Shake. So this was like the normal operation. But at the end of the day, for instance, I use Photoshop a lot. And I love Photoshop. I started using Photoshop. Okay, no, I'm not going to tell you I look very old if I say. I started using Photoshop at version 1.5. Okay? So, and it wasn't like a big deal. And I do the same thing in Photoshop. But there are other ways of applying all of this. There is like a God mode for applying this, which is the color lookup, the curves. So once you know the matrix, you apply like, okay, you go with the curve and you model using the curves. So you can do that. But if you do that, it's because, wow, you know a lot how those nodes behave. I will say that this is like very good because it's very clear in the state. But the color corrections is software independent. I said during the class, it's like compositing happens here. The other is just a translator. So whatever the software you use, the important thing is like you are the compositor, not the software.
And actually, to answer what you were saying about Fusion, I wouldn't even say Fusion, but Resolve has all of these, even with these names. You can actually, all of this color correction setup, you can actually do it in nodes inside Resolve color page. Instead of Fusion, just the color page. You can pretty much do that. Yeah, it's fine.
He's done now.
Yeah. So yeah, at the end of the day, this is like the bread and butter of anybody handling images. That's why I was very surprised when I understood that people doing compositing in the industry these days is not this familiar. So you are now the next generations of compositors. You need to know this. You have to kick ass to the people that is not knowing this. So this is what is going to put your foot on the door. If you are better than them because you got faster the concepts. They got it because they have the experience, but now you understand it. So it's your responsibility.
And that's a great way to end the session. A round of applause for Victor Perez.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.